Hey everybody, Andrew Lowen here. On this podcast, we are going to discuss the concept of launching an expansion versus a standalone product on Kickstarter. We discuss topics like the DNA of a product and what that means, if you should launch with a product focused on DNA or theme, and all of the aspects related to innovation in regard to an expansion. And in general, if you want to launch an expansion campaign and make the most money possible, let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Go back to the shadow. You shall not fail. Crowdfunding Nerds.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lunn, and I am joined neither by Sean nor Rick this time. Instead, I have Chip Cole with me. He is the, he runs Squatchy Games. He's also Chip, the designer. He is my graphic designer for Deliverance and, a game publisher and all the things in between. We actually had Chip on to discuss work-life balance because cumulatively, Chip, you have 9 children and I have 7. So that's probably more than everyone listening to this podcast combined.
Right.
At least, we're not in last place, put it that way,
No.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Awesome.
yeah. So the topic for this episode is relevant to what I'm doing right now, which is I launched an expansion for my game, but the topic is launching an expansion versus launching a standalone game and the differences between those two things. So this is very specific to board games and also, generally tabletop games where you can have a project that you launch and you create this universe of story and whatnot that would now require and actually books are very much the same, where you launch a book and if it becomes big, then you can launch a sequel. But the people that read your original book, that's going to be greater than the amount that reads the sequel, right? And so the same is true with your expansion. And the behavior that I've found in from the fans that have backed the Deliverance campaign, it is wildly different than I expected. And, in good ways and challenging ways that, overall it was just something I'm like, wow, I was not prepared for this. I need to prepare my podcast listeners for this if they, and so, anyway, we got to talking, you and I, Chip, about this, and we had a really engaging discussion that I just wished was on the podcast. And so here we are, right?
Here we are. Yeah, exactly.
So before we dive in, maybe you could just give our audience a little bit more of a well-rounded understanding of who you are, in case they've never heard of you and what you do, and why you might be an expert on this topic.
Heard of me. Yeah, pseudo expert, let's say. It's highly likely they've never heard of me before. So Chip, as Andrew introduced me. I run Squatchy Games, which we published. Well, we're waiting on our second game to arrive, but our original published game was Cryptic Cafe. That was forever ago. I don't even know. I think it was 2021 maybe at this point. And then we had the sequel. So this is kind of where it ties in. We had a sequel game called Cryptic Cafe: The Chef's Apprentice, which is currently wrapping up manufacturing, and we're waiting for it just to be delivered so that we can start fulfilling that game, hopefully by the end of the year this year. In addition to that, I do a lot of freelance graphic design and illustration for Andrew and a variety of other publishers. Anything from Kickstarter pages to illustrations for card designs and so forth. The whole gamut. Basically, the only thing I don't do is animated videos and voiceovers, although I could probably do a voiceover. But
yeah, you do have a chocolate rain voice. A little chocolate rain.
Little chocolate rain. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. From a professional side, I've been a graphic designer for 27 years now. On the personal side, I'm just I got 9 kids and a wife, and we just got a crazy family. And
you've got a significantly sized board game shelf, right?
I do. It's over there somewhere. It's just this whole wall, but for some reason I've decided to show you what the after parties of a 50th birthday that my wife just had. So everything got tossed in the basement due to my office. So I'm trying to use my big head to block it all out. Yeah. But Yeah, and luckily I got all my kids like to play games, so I've got like a built-in test group, so I can play smaller games with my younger kids, and my older kids like to play the heavier stuff. So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I am fostering my playtest group. My oldest is now 12.
There you
She'll
go.
play almost anything with me. It's really
Nice.
awesome. It's really amazing when the kids start to learn to read and then get decent at math and whatnot. It's just like Deliverance requires a lot of reading, and it's just amazing that my 12-year-old's just busting out everything no problem. It's like, wow, when did you learn to be so fluent in the English language, And it's like, just it's
Right.
cool.
It
Whereas
is
like
really
my
cool.
7-year-old needs, we just got this game called Star Realms Academy, which is Star Realms without any text on the cards so it's symbols only, language independent. And so I can play it with the little kids that are still having a hard time, or still learning to read, but are have learned addition, and it's like a perfect thing. It's like, okay, how many coins do you get and whatever, right?
Right.
So it's one of those games that I actually love, because I can play it with my young kids, and it doesn't make me want to poke my eyes out with a pencil, like most
Right.
little
It
kid games.
still challenges you as an adult. A lot of my younger kids like Azul and Quacks, so they like
Uh-huh.
those because it doesn't require a lot of stuff. And it's fun. They're all about the push to luck element too.
Mhm.
They just love the idea of luck and how it might play into it versus a more experienced gamer who wants to kind of mitigate all that. But they love it because it
Yep.
has those highs and lows. Like yeah,
Yeah.
you're like oh man, yeah. So they like those
That's
crushing blows sometimes.
That's awesome. Yeah, one game that
Yeah.
we really love in our household is Chicken because of the push your luck. It's if you're not familiar with it, it's a dice rolling game where when you roll the right symbols, you get more dice. And so the dice when you roll the wrong symbol, which is a fox, if you get 3 foxes, you bust. But if you can roll like Yahtzee, you roll up to 3 times, get points and other things like that. And and then when you're finished, it's like, all right, I'm done. I rolled, like, I have 8 dice now. You pass all the dice that you've unlocked to the next player. So they start with 8 dice. So they're much more likely to
Uh,
bust, but
yeah,
also
yeah.
much more likely to earn higher points. So you can kind of push your luck, and you unlock like all 12 dice, pass them to the next player. They roll it once and just bust immediately. And it's super
Yeah,
funny.
it's interesting.
Um,
Yeah, I've
yeah,
never
so
seen
it's
that
it's
before.
really satisfying. Even my 4-year-old can play, and just have a really fun time. The dice go flying everywhere and whatnot. So, well, yeah. So let's get into the topic at hand. We have this concept of the standalone game versus an expansion. So maybe we could describe first, what is a standalone game, and how is it different than an expansion?
Yeah, I mean, my mindset is that standalone just doesn't require any of the previous elements. Like, if you can break out the game without having to pull back any of the components from the previous game, then it should be standalone. I also think it comes down to content as well. Like, you wouldn't want to make a game that can be, quote standalone and be super super light. You get this. I think it's where a lot of people make the judgment call. It's like, do I just do this as an add-on because there's not enough content, or do I do this as a standalone because we've developed too much content? Right? Is it too much to add on to the other game? But for sheer definition, it just can't reuse any of the previous components. Yeah,
Mhm.
it would be my definition. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. I think that the expansion requires the base game to play, and so by definition, you are doing one of two things. You're either limiting your audience to people who already own the game, or
Right.
you are asking people to buy 2 products, right? Like, so
Yeah.
when you sell the expansion, they need to have the base game to play. And so there's a decision to be made, which is, do I get this or don't I? But it's a little bit more challenging because it's going to be more expensive if they have to buy the base game and the expansion versus just maybe a what people will call a standalone expansion, which maybe adds new characters, new pieces and whatnot, but is generally able to be played from the box without requiring any additional components. It might be benefited by the original game, let's say with character variety or card variety or other things like that, but you do not need the base product to play that, right?
Standalone expansion. Would that
Yeah.
be That's interesting. That's an interesting definition right there. Standalone expansion versus just a second edition.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like how that becomes.
Yeah, so and that's actually one thing that we were thinking about for Deliverance. We were thinking, um, I would like to make a, just an awesome version of an expansion. And people
Right.
really loved it, so we needed to follow up with something. So we've been working diligently on an expansion, but early on, you're really just working on content, like characters and boss fights and other things like that. And the question is, what are we going to do in regard to components included inside the box? There are certain, if it's going to be its standalone product, we're going
Mhm.
to need to include an additional, let's say, like for Deliverance specifically, we need to include a darkness board. We need to include the Heavenly Gates tile. Those things are essential to make sure that you have a play area to put the various cards in the game, and like the starting spaces for the angels are on the Heavenly Gates. If I didn't need to, let's say I required the base game to play, which is actually the decision that we made, I would be able to forego those components because my players would have those from the original game. And so we launched our Kickstarter this last week,
Right.
and it was very successful. We had I want to say we made about let's see, the first Kickstarter we made 135,000 or so on the first day, according to KickTrack, like 140,000, according to me. And then this one we made about $40,000 more, um, on day one, which was awesome. It's like a third additional funding on that
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that first day, which is really great. Currently, like at the time of this recording, we're over 200K, and we're on the this is now like the start of day 3. So this is like the start of what we call our mid campaign slump. We're 204,000
Yeah.
is where we're at. And
Well, it's
I'm cool
almost
with
time for me to
that.
do another stretch goal.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been struggling to keep up with stretch goals. Just, there's so many things that you can prepare for, and then everything you've prepared helps you because you are going to have to rush and hustle to get all of the other things that you forgot in, right? And
Yeah.
so
And you have to see a perfect lunch for anybody.
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
but it's been really an interesting experience because the types of questions, the amount of like funding per backer compared to the first game and other things like that have been much different. And I'm really excited and encouraged. But man, it's just a different experience, and it's scary. It's just as scary as if I launched, like the first time I launched the first game, for a number of additional reasons that we'll get into. But the first thing that I noticed that was really different was that the average pledge from my audience is $150 right now. That is about $40 higher, or anywhere between $30 and $40 higher than it was on the last campaign. In addition to that, my project followers, we have 27% of them which have converted right now. And that is, so we have 3,500 project followers, and or so we have 969 of them have converted, and then that, which leads us to a 27% conversion rate. That is very high. Like as a marketer, most projects that I see, the only conversion rates that are high, oftentimes they have like 200 followers, 300 followers, and they'll get 100 or so conversions for anywhere from like 30 to 40% conversion rate, and that's because they're hardcore fans, or their family or whatever are much more likely to back, right? But then this project being one that is much more, let's say, publicized, and you've got a lot of the fans, but then you have a lot of others that have followed along because they've heard about it for one reason or another. That to me is a really high conversion rate. um and I didn't expect that for the expansion, but I was very
Really?
pleased with it. Yeah.
See, I
I
would expect a higher return rate. I would expect a higher conversion rate for something that's an expansion because you've kind of already got a built-in audience
Yeah.
as far as the product. And so,
Mhm.
assuming that your first product was obviously successful, then
Yep.
you would think a lot of people would be just, yeah, put it out there and I would get it. So that seems logical to me that they'd actually have a good return on it or
Yeah.
conversion rate on it, just because
Yeah,
they're
I
coming
should
back more.
have. It's funny because it's like I should have thought I should have known that, but we've actually never run an expansion that has been, we'll say, like a really big one. A lot of the games, like for example, like we did Distilled, and that was a really popular game. Then we did Luthier, which was the next game by Paverson, and marketing, and that's a standalone game that uses a lot of the same DNA from Distilled, which is very successful. Luthier did great, and but those were each standalone games that happened to appeal to the same exact audience, which is very purposeful. That's
Sure.
most of the time that I launch successive projects from companies. I'll get one game they'll do one game that they become known for, and then they'll use that system in all their other games. So for example, Chip Theory Games with Too Many Bones, they came up with this system that they use for Too Many Bones. They use a very similar system, or maybe it was Hoplomachus. Anyway, they have this one system where it's like chips and little status effects or keywords on the chips which represent characters, and you've got various versions of that or implementations of this system in almost all their games. So they've got
Interesting.
Hoplomachus, Cloudspire, Too Many Bones, and Elder Scrolls are like
I'm
four
familiar with, yeah.
massive
Okay.
releases that all use that, a variation of that system. So that's usually what I see. But then, like,
So
mhm,
then at that point, we're talking like familiarity with, if you will, with the game systems
mhm,
and mechanics. So I guess what I was trying to get to is that that's how you're creating a return audience is for that. So, or like let's take kids table board games, right? Like
mhm,
there's a certain level. There's an expectation of how deep it's going to be, how
yep,
cute it's going to be, and so then you just know with every game that they push out, it's probably going to fall within this range,
mhm,
which makes
mhm,
sense as a publisher. You should definitely know who your audience is and who
yep,
you're trying to design for, anyways, or even publish for, because no one company is going to be able to satisfy every gamer's needs. And I think that's one of the core rules when they tell you to design a game. You can't design a game that's going to satisfy everybody. It's gonna only appeal to
yep,
a certain audience. You just have to design what you like. But if you
right,
do have an idea of what your DNA is and what you're good at, like chip theory, you should probably stick to it so that you
mhm,
can obviously appeal to your customer base and just try
yep.
and grow that customer base and get those returns that way.
Absolutely. And I find that companies that have one company that I love is Stonemeyer Games. I love their products. Wormspan has become a recent favorite in our household. More of a gamer's game than Wingspan. I wholeheartedly love it way more than Wingspan just because it feels like like every decision I make is more strategic and not based on, oh, I don't have any worms in the bird feeder, I can't play
Yeah,
all half
yeah,
my
yeah.
hand,
See,
right?
but I may have to get my
So
cousin just got that one.
yeah, it's a really fun one. But yeah, I think that the DNA of those games kind of boils down to it plays 1 to 5 players. You do one thing on your turn. You get a single action. So play is meant to proceed pretty quickly. You
Sure.
generally have one or between 1 and 4 choices on your turn. Well, so I'll say like 3 to 4 choices. You might have 4 total actions that you can take in a Stonemeyer game, and for Tapestry, it's which one of the 4 tracks do you want to move up? With which cause other things. It's like, oh, you move up the war track or whatever, you get the conquest track. You get to fight on the battlefield a little bit. But or like Scythe, you can generally move, you can trade, you've got 4 choices. Or Wormspan is the same. You can build in the top, or Wingspan too, the top place, the middle place, the bottom place. You've got these 3 different actions that you can activate, or you can place a card, so it's like 4 different actions. So generally the
And secondary
DNA,
actions. He's always got something
yeah,
about secondary actions. You do this action and it triggers another action over here that you might be able to take. That seems to be
yes.
always included as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of like engine building combo game that
Yeah.
the sum of your actions will add up to this satisfying engine, right? And you'll be able to run the full engine like a few times, and it's
If you're
really
lucky, yeah.
satisfying. But then the game ends before it becomes like before it drags on, right?
Right.
So yeah, so the same DNA I find is a very successful combination, a very successful system. Modifius with its 2D20 system, for example, Modifius Entertainment in tabletop RPGs, they are very well known for their 2D20 system. So if you play Fallout, if you play Dune, if you play Star Trek, if you play Conan, a lot of other different products, you will generally find the same system with modified rules that fit that universe. Set your phasers to stun versus kill in Star Trek, right?
Sure.
Whereas Fallout, there's no stun; it's only kill. So anyway, yeah, I think that those types of thing that's an observation that I don't think that I really put enough stock. Well, I say don't put enough stock in. What I meant is that I didn't really have as much respect for and knowledge and of how important that was until launching the expansions. Actually launching the expansion, not even building the expansion, but launching it on Kickstarter. It showed me so many things that I'm really excited to dig into. But
Yeah.
I guess my first takeaway is it makes so much sense to come up with a new game. In fact, it's so much easier to come up with a new game, some kind of game using the same DNA from your old one, because for Deliverance, I worked, 5 to 7 years on that system before gamers got it into their hands. And now I have this really cool darkness card system. I have a really cool talent card system, and those, the way the characters are customized, that's very unique to Deliverance. That's Deliverance DNA. And so if
Mhm.
any game at this point used that, everyone would say, well, Deliverance did it first. Just like if I were to use a game that had chips with abilities on it, that would be like, oh, well, Chip Theory Games did that first. You're just
Right.
copying their system or whatever, right? I mean, it's I find what is it? What do they call it? Copying is the highest form of
Flattery.
flattery. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
and we do find, we stand on the shoulders of giants. There's no way that I would have come up with this system if Dungeons and Dragons didn't do their thing way back in the 80s. All right.
Oh yeah. Every game
So
has some hint of DNA from a previous game, and it's just that's why it's so hard to invent a new mechanic. I mean, there's,
yep.
they always say, yeah, I've got, you'll see someone who joins for the first time on board game design labs, whatever. I got this great mechanic I've developed. And
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, that was done like 15, 20 years ago in this game, but,
Yep.
keep going, develop it,
Yeah.
turn it to your own thing.
Yeah.
And, I think that's one of the coolest challenges of game design is I think more now it's like mixing, coming up with a cake. Like I'm going to take
Mhm.
this mechanic and I'm going to mix it with this mechanic. We're going to do this,
Mhm.
and it's going to trigger this, and then this is my souffle over here, cake over
Yep.
here. And someone who could have taken the same four and changed it around and came up with something entirely different. And I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, no, I what you're
lost my
saying
train
is
of thought.
basically the cake, the formula that makes something successful is innovation, is what it comes down to. Is like, how does this make me feel different than anything else I've got on my shelf? Because that's
Yeah.
really the end game for a game. People that buy games through crowdfunding or just even on the market, they're going to look at a product and say, do I have that experience on my shelf already? What is innovative about that is going that I makes me need it, right? Versus like I've already got other dungeon crawlers. I've got Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle Earth. I've already got other card games. I've got whatever.
Hmm.
This experience has to be something new and innovative that I don't have. And so the question in everybody's mind is, what is truly innovative that I care about, right? And so
I
those
wonder how
that's
much
the main
IP
question.
plays into that as well. Like when you said Lord of the Rings,
Yeah,
right? So you've already got a dungeon crawler, but oh, I want a Lord of the
but it's
Rings
not
dungeon
Lord of the
crawler.
Rings, right?
It's like,
Yeah.
so how much does that play into it? Because if you have something that's very, if they're identical games, just different
Mhm.
IPs, would you want to own two? Would you want to own them both? Just because you know that the flavor in the other ones can be a little bit different. I think this is where a lot of people in board game design go: do you go theme first or do you go mechanic first? Right?
Yep.
And because I'm personally a theme first guy, but it's interesting. That'd be another
Yeah.
interesting question to kind of pursue down. Is like, would you buy the same game if it's just wrapped up in a different theme?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we see that, for example, lately we've got a Lord of the Rings themed Seven Wonders duel. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
like I can't remember what it's called right now, but yeah, people are eating that one up. Wormspan is another thing that we brought up, which is a
Yeah.
more
Basically,
fantasy version of Wingspan. Well, I say more fantasy. All the birds in Wingspan are real, so it's a fantasy version because
right, right.
dragons, But that is something that people gobble up, dude. They love that stuff, and I think that intellectual property, there is a strong case to be made for what I would kind of consider theme. I would wrap into theme. So like intellectual property, like we just are helping Modifius with with lots of other projects, but one of them is Mass Effect 3,
Yeah,
and that just the fact that it's Mass Effect makes people want to buy it because they have Mass Effect. We did Skyrim for Modifius, and everybody owns at least 3 copies of Skyrim in different forms. It's like
right.
if you
Yeah,
have Skyrim, like if you own Skyrim, you typically own it at least 3 times. You've got the board game and the game on Steam and the game when it released on your PlayStation in whatever 2012, and maybe you bought it on your new Xbox 360 at the time, but
right.
now you just need it on Steam because you wanted to get back into that world. And so, yeah, you've got 3 or 4 copies of that. So I think that the theme is one area of innovation that actually moves the needle for people. And so like I think of like Darkest Dungeon or other video games that became board games.
Mhm.
Those typically do very well. The Witcher is an example of a book that became a series that became a on Netflix that became a board game and or video games. I'm sorry,
I think they
that
do very
became
well in funding, right? Like, not all of
right,
those have done very well as far as like being an end product. Some of them are like, oh man,
right, hmm
they just basically cashed in on the theme and produced a subpar product sometimes. So,
right,
while I think theming and using those IPs are important, uh, people still want something to play, right? Like, you
yes,
wouldn't just buy Lord of the Rings just because Lord of the Rings, but because again, it was wrapped around a different system that you're already familiar with. Like, okay, you know what? I know this. I know this is gonna be
hmm
a good game. Now I get to play it as Frodo. That's gonna
yep,
be awesome. That's just gonna
yeah,
totally appeal to my full on geek nature, and I'm gonna be able
hmm
to see some of that flavor throughout the game. And so it allows me to get into that world a little bit better using a system that I like already. So
yep,
I think that's kind of how those sometimes be successful. I'd
right.
be
In
curious to
fact,
see
with
like an
Lord of the
IP with a
Rings.
brand new
Mhm.
mechanics altogether. That'd be a challenge and a half.
Yeah, yeah. I think and there are examples of this. So like if you look at Lord of the Rings Journeys to Middle Earth, that
Yeah.
one was released by Fantasy Flight Games using the Mansions of Madness system. So they Fantasy Flight came up with this app, this companion app for Mansions of Madness, which is like a
Mhm.
Cthulhu themed. You're inside a house and the house is mad at you. And by the way, the end of the world's coming if you don't stop it. Um, and
Typical.
I'm not
Yeah.
it's super excited about Cthulhu themes typically, but this one was a little bit we'll say like not as dark as most Cthulhu games are. And
Yeah.
so but still like I didn't buy it because it didn't appeal to me enough. But then they took that same exact system, the system of discovering new things, of opening up new rooms. They turned it into map tiles, and they even used the same exact artist from Mansions of Madness, to
Really?
do the Lord of the Rings Journey to Middle Earth. Yeah, actually, I
Yeah.
know that because I'm using that artist too for my map tiles. Like I love these Journeys to Middle Earth map tiles. I wonder if that guy will take Deliverance because I wanted to do a similar perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and so they use the same app, right? Like you spend potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on a
Oh, yeah.
companion app for a game. You can just reskin it and it'll be instead of, $400,000 plus 10,000 a month in ongoing maintenance, you'll have maybe $100,000 to develop the thing and no additional ongoing maintenance. Right? You've got
Right.
your storage space and your same developers that you're paying anyway. It's like now you guys can work on 2 games, right? And so that is a great example of the same DNA in a new system. You skin it with Lord of the Rings, and they sell 3 times more, right?
Yeah.
So I find that to be really interesting. But another game that I think was totally innovative and new is if you're watching on video, this one right here, Chronicles of Crime by Lucky Duck Games was a brand new idea that it's kind of the idea of being a detective in like a romanticized version of a like a detective in the 60s or 70s, where you're kind of more like a
Yeah.
reporter that's
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
discover what happened and report accurately what happened. um and they've come up with several different chronicles of crime that span through history, that are maybe just like modern day. They have an app that they developed for this, that where you can kind of scan cards like QR codes to talk to those people and ask them questions and things, and show them evidence, and very fun. But it totally brand new system that required a lot of money to spend on that app, and really a lot of investment in so many different ways, and that took off by itself. I think that right there is probably a company maker for them. Like, the reason that Lucky Duck Games exists in the form it does may very well be dedicated to Chronicles of Crime. Or, if I apologize, there's like an earlier version of this that was app based, but I know that they have Destinies that they came up with that also uses an app in a very, I believe, a similar fashion. And they are using that system, as I, was we're using this term, the same DNA, to make
Mm.
standalone
Yeah.
games, and same thing, Chronicles of Crime, every box that you buy is what would be considered a standalone expansion. So I've got this one right here that I face. All the other Chronicles of Crime games, or that's facing the camera, all the other Chronicles of Crime games that I own are behind it, and then the the Planet Unknown Lazy Susan is on top. But the each of the games in that box, I got I backed the Kickstarter. It's got you go through 1400 AD, you go through 1900 AD, and then 2400 AD. Each of those games is sold separately. I got all of them via the Kickstarter, so I got the big box. But those are $30 products that you can sell separately. um and that's exactly what they do, because you can play them on their own.
Those are
So
standalones, not considered sequels. There's no like. I mean,
there is some connectivity between the three. Like, there is one story. In fact, there's a there's there's just a little bit of story, like 1400,
yeah.
1900, 2400. You're kind of dealing with the same corporation. You're dealing with we'll say like like the next generation of people in a particular family. And so there's a little bit of shared DNA, but then they did this one um like a 4 mission series that actually you travel through time, and kind of uh, connect the dots between what's happening.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
find that to be very compelling. But that would be an example of an expansion that is not standalone, that does require all three of those to play. You know,
At
so
least the knowledge of, yeah,
right.
having
So I'm
played
sure
played
that
the
the
previous ones.
sales, yeah. So that, like, on Kickstarter or GameFound, when you make an expansion that requires the base game to play, I think that the chances of, if the base game was well enjoyed by everybody, the expansion, you're just going to do a great job with the expansion. It's going to look very, very positive. For me, we have a huge percentage of people that came out that more are backing every day. We are getting new people that are backing the base game, the all in, everything all in for $259. Like, there's a huge chunk of people doing that. But then afterward, when it goes to the market, this is the advice that I've received from so many others that are ahead of me in these different areas. You will likely sell 4 times as many base games as you do expansions when it comes to the retail market, or even selling direct on your website. Just generally after crowdfunding's over. So if I make, let's just say, to keep it simple, like 1,000 base games and 1,000 expansions, I'll sell 1,000 base games by the time I sell 250 expansions.
Mm.
So in that case, I wouldn't have any base games left, and I'd only have expansions left. It's like, well, these are just burning a hole in my pocket in a warehouse somewhere.
Right, it's a
So
dead product or not.
right. So what you want to make sure of is that you don't accident, just by making a logistics error, you would much rather make 1,500 base games and then 500 expansions, and then if you sold, let's just say you sold through, like, I don't know, 1,200 of your base games, and you still had, so you had 300 left, but you had 300 expansions left. you could, or 250 left, you can bundle them together, and then in essence almost require that both of them are sold together, right? So you have the fewest amount of lost inventory at the
Right.
end of that process, right? So and it's a great opportunity as well. Bundling is a great way after. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but if you bundle all of your products together, that is, and you can reduce the price because of the bundle. It's like if I sell a
Mhm.
base game and an expansion to somebody, I make enough revenue that I can afford to put a little bit of give them a little bit of a discount. Also, your crowdfunding people are not typically upset because they got the single product at a discount, but to see everything at a slight discount is typically going to be higher than they paid anyway. So that's not it's not something that offends anybody. um
And
you
they've
know
had it for a year or two, so they've
mhm,
obviously get paid to play sooner than rather than later.
right.
So there's those kinds of things, and you really have to weigh all that. Because I remember I was at a convention and uh, Cryptic Cafe just done fulfilling, and we were able to go to Gen Con with it. And then someone came up and was like, "Hey, I guess I paid $12 more because I had to pay for shipping when I could have just got it here at Gen Con." I'm like, "Yeah, but you've had it for a little while, and you helped make the product come to life." And it's all perspective. I
Right.
mean, um, which can be a challenge for manage those backers perspective. But I think when you're saying with the bundle thing, we bundled. I had like 40. Those are them over there in the background. I only had 43 or 42 copies left of the deluxe edition, and I was like, I'll just bundle it with our last campaign, and those went first. Those are gone fast. Like all 43 of them were gone
Yep.
because people wanted to be able to get a little bit of a price, and they wanted to just bundle it with the original game. And there's something to be said about bundling. It's nice. It's a nice little tool to have. I wish I had more games.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I find as an e-com, so when I'm selling stuff on e-commerce, the bundle will outperform. So we did we sell all sorts of stuff beyond games and whatnot, but one of our clients sells Ghost Scream hot sauce is what it's called, Ghost Scream. We worked with them for a long time, but they sold hot sauce one at a time. And the challenge with them is that they make their stuff off the Naga Jalokia ghost pepper. And in
Mhm.
order to actually have enough ghost peppers to make product, they have to, in essence, um, pre-order it from a farm and say, we will take all the ghost peppers from your farm that are produced in this crop area, and that will come next year. And so they get a certain amount of inventory. And if they're like, oh, we need more than that, they can't just go and say, oh yes, I send another batch, because the entire crop was claimed.
Sure.
So they're gonna, and the farmer is gonna sell the entire crop. It's like, however much I've got to receive for the work that I've done, I'm not gonna let these go rotten, right? And so
Right.
I'm
Right.
gonna sell them, right? But and farming, my father-in-law used to farm, and it was a rough business. Sometimes you would get a great price for your fruit, and then the packing house knows that your fruit's all going to go rotten in 2 weeks, and they're like, well, we'll give you half price. And it's like, well, do I have half price or nothing and
Yeah.
cleanup work to do, right? And so it's can be a rough business. So
Interesting.
pre-selling all of the crop is really important in a business like that. And so anyway, they have limited inventory. So that business has limited inventory. They can only make so much hot sauce, and they can sell it here, there, and everywhere. But so they can sell it on Amazon, they can sell it on their website, they can sell it direct to consumers at conventions, or for them it was like street fairs. And they make the best margin when they sell on their website, or when they sell direct to consumers at conventions, um, and or street fairs. So
Sure.
they were talking to me about, like, how can we sell more, because we have a limited amount of product. And one of the challenges to taking us on as like a marketing company for them was like, we only have a certain amount of money, and we are guaranteed to sell all of this stock. So why would we take some of that money and give it to you so that you can help us market this product, right? Like, if we're going to
Yeah.
just make, and this is a valid concern for everybody, if we're just going to sell all of the stuff, why would we involve you?
Yeah, why would we cut
And
into our profit line, our bottom line?
exactly. And the only way that that can happen, it reminds me of Tulsa King. Anyway, that's too much of a tangent, but so the idea is that I, as a marketer, need to be able to justify my rates and wages and say, you will make more money from using me, right? And so this was a really interesting one. We've done this a lot of times, happens with board games, happens with everything. You have limited inventory and you need to make the highest margins possible, because you know that the more margins you make, the better your company does, and the more you're able to make, and
Well,
without
and
being in
reinvest
crushing
into the
debt.
future products. Yeah, I mean, it
Exactly.
keeps it running, keeps
Yes.
development
So
going.
right. So the first thing that we did was we bundled their hot sauce. We're like, okay, you make much better margins on your website, and you're not selling very much on your website. You're selling almost all of it on Amazon. So let's bundle 6 hot sauces together and 12 hot sauces together. I at the time, this was a long time ago that I did this, but I had a client that sold paleo meals. Like, it was a paleo meal delivery service that was like, for CrossFit athletes, they sold one, set of meals per week, and at a time. And I'm like, let's bundle and do, like, have people pay for 4 weeks of meals at a time, and then 6 weeks of meals at a time. The 4 weeks of meals at a time became their best seller, and they made 4 times the revenue per customer. And they had customers that would constantly return because they formed habits of relying on them, and they made way more money, and they actually sold for millions of dollars to a big company because they were so profitable. So I'm like, hey, let's do that exact same thing with this hot sauce. And this was back, I want to say, in like 2016 or something, that we did this with the hot sauce. So, we bundles of 6 and bundles of 12. Bundles of 6 became the number one seller. So people would buy 6 times the product from their website, and they could actually compete against Amazon now, because if I'm selling 6 bottles for, let's just say, keep it simple, $10 a piece, $60 a bottle. I want to say it's like 11 or 12, something like that.
Sure.
But then you can do the bundle at like $50, so you can cut $10 off, and then sell $50 of product in a single order from your website. You are going to make twice as much money almost from your website as you will from Amazon, right? Like,
Why
in
is that?
regard to like margin. So your
Oh,
margin
as
will
far as
be like,
margins, okay.
yeah. So whereas let's say it actually costs you like $25 to, in shipping and then in everything else, and you make 50, to keep it simple. If you sold on Amazon, it would still cost you, but then you would only make like, 40. So, that would be a $15 profit versus a $25 profit. And that means, well, that those numbers right there, your margin, the actual amount of money that you can reinvest into your company, increases by 40%. And
Hmm.
that's how I justify my pay, right? So they loved me. They were like, I don't know how this is gonna work, and after a while, it's like, yeah, well, this is how it will work, right? Another challenge, like, we're working recently with Magpie. We're selling Avatar. They're doing their Root RPG on Kickstarter, and they told me, like, we've sold 100,000 units of the Avatar RPG base rules. Like, they're basically the entry level product is like the base game of this series, and you can get all sorts of other supplements for it and whatnot. And so part of the challenge was like, well, how do we, when the market is so saturated already, how do we sell more Avatar? And the answer is that you have to you have to upsell and bundle. And also, of course, gifts are a big thing too. But market, just getting people to buy this product as a gift for someone else, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. So anyway, it's the bundle is extremely powerful, and so bringing this full circle back to Deliverance and what we decided to do with
Yeah.
our audience. If you are doing an expansion by itself, you need to bundle. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world that you would bundle. You would give people a pledge for, let's just say, so we did our base game. We had an all in for the base game, which included, like, some cosmetic upgrades and whatever, and that was in 2021. And then this time we've got an expansion. So the expansion is, you've got a huge swath of people that just have the base game, loved it, and now they just want the expansion because it's expensive if you get all the cosmetic stuff too, and they just need an entry level price, and that's it, right? But a new person, a new player, is going to say, well, I can't buy this expansion. I need to buy the base game too.
Sure.
And so we have the ability to get the base game as a reward. And in fact, as I look at it, let me get into the dashboard so I can actually just show people or tell people what our numbers are like so far. Let's see we've done this. Okay, so we've got 16% of our backers backed the deluxe expansion for about $21,000 pledged. We had 3% of our backers only back the deluxe base game for a total of $3,400 pledged. But then when you look at the number of people who have
That's an odd
bundled,
number right there.
right? Yeah,
Like,
just
why would you
34
come in and
people.
get the base game? You know,
Mhm.
I mean, you've got all this other stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
it's going to be
well,
really interesting.
so what I learned was, I was talking to a buddy of mine that works at Thunderworks Games. He, and they're super experienced with a lot of, going into expansions, doing standalone games in their same universes, and they have
Right.
this universe they call Ulos that is known for games like Role Player and a lot of other games related. But the what Kirk Dennison was my guy. He said that you should probably make sure that the base game is available because people will buy it. But what we did was we also bundled the product. So we have a gameplay bundle. 9% of our backers got that one for a total of almost $20,000 pledged. And then we
Yeah.
did what we call the everything all in, which is all the gameplay content and all the cosmetic upgrades for everything we've ever made bundled together. And 153 people grabbed that for almost $51,000. Like 25% of our money raised is in the quote unquote everything all in that includes the base game. So all of our fans that already own the base game are not going to buy this because they, for the most part, we just talked to one guy that was like, a board game designer giving his Deliverance All In copy away as a gift at a convention, and he's going to buy the everything all in because he needs his Deliverance stuff back, right, in some way, which is really cool. But that's something that generally will be brand new people to the whole Deliverance game that are just getting everything all in one go.
Yeah, that's what you
Yeah.
would, I would assume. You had everything all in, and then you have your bundle, and then you have your just base game alone. What's the total percentage of that? Like, if you add up those three percentages, you had what? It was like
So
9% for the bundle, 3% for base game, and then what
yeah,
was
so
the
let's
everything
see.
all in?
23% of people grabbed the base game. So 23, and that's not including the add-ons. We did include the base game in various bundles that we used as add-ons. So 23% of people that backed our campaign are responsible for 37% of the money raised for the campaign. So
Interesting. So then
these
a
are
big
larger
portion
pledges.
was the previous backers because they were most likely just doing the everything new, right? Everything all new.
Yeah, so that was another really important bundle. So we had the deluxe expansion, which it was a little tiny bundle in and of itself. And I think this is so rather than going for a really cheap price, what I elected to do is charge in essence what amounts to the MSRP, like we'll call it the quote unquote retail cost for the product. But instead of, and normally what you do is you discount on Kickstarter. But what I did instead was I added additional products in there. So the scenario book was could have up to 30 additional gameplay scenarios based on how we do. And then so it'll have, right now it's got 15 additional scenarios in it, which is awesome for all those players. We also have like a free cosmetic, like 2-part token that helps you track experience and the round, and it's
This
like a
came out really
2-piece
cool, by
metal
the way.
token.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that looks really
So
nice.
that was kind of a little bit of a bundle. Like we gave people more value. And I think that the overall equation people do is like, do I get more for less? Do I, and these are, you can do the more, the same, and less. And if I get less for much less, then that's good. If I get more for less, that's good. If I get much more in value for more in monetary cost, that works out well. But if I get, more product for the same price, there's no value there. Like you need to exceed the value expectation of the customer for them to jump in. So to clarify, if you give people value, you need to exceed the value needs to exceed the natural value that they have for the money that they would spend to get that thing. So
Yeah.
if I'm spending $79 to get a deluxe expansion that I can just get later, like you said, at the booth for $79, why would I do that right now? And my answer to that, like the response to that, so that's a challenge. An objection means just like a buying signal. Like I'm willing to buy this if you can answer this to my satisfaction.
Sure.
Which is, so anytime anybody asks you a critical question like that, it's a really good thing. So the answer for us is like, well, you don't just get the deluxe expansion, but you also get this scenario book, which is growing in value, and you get this free combo, metal token set
Right.
that you would have to pay for afterwards. So you're saving like $17 off of what you would normally spend. Actually, it's more like 27 because we're going to sell the scenario book for $20 after the Kickstarter is done, on its own. In
Which
addition, of course,
ideally will then offset those shipping costs. So you end
right?
up breaking out net zero, right? By the time you're done with it.
Yeah,
For
yeah. So
the
like,
backer. Yeah.
exactly. So we're able to bundle everything together. They like it, and we get their conversion. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have a very high conversion rate. I have done other expansions before. Normally what happens is the conversion goes from, so our conversion on our first Kickstarter was very high. I've seen other conversions from very successful projects like we did like Ascension Tactics or Luthier or Distilled. Like you get typically when the follower count is very high, you've got, like I said, your hardcore fans that are going to back it no matter what, and that's like your first, out of your first 300 to 500 fans or followers, you're going to have a very high conversion rate from that. But generally, overall on Kickstarter, the amalgamated conversion rate of a successful project on the first day of launch, like at the conclusion of the first day of launch, a good conversion rate is between 15 and 20%. That's good. Lower than 15% tells me that there's a little bit of a problem either with the like the offer or the value proposition is not that good, or maybe you didn't show the gameplay well enough, or there's some what I call hygiene factor problem where your shipping is not clear, or your policy and something is not clear, or you're missing a playthrough video, right? But then when you go above 20%, I think that is delighting the people that are backing. So our conversion rate for the first Deliverance was 23% at the end of the first day. And I remember games like Ascension Tactics hit like 24% at the end of the first day, or like other games like Distilled Luthier, or Galactic Cruise. Those did really well. This campaign for us was 26%. So we really delighted our people. And now, on day 3 is 27%. Normally what happens is the conversion rate goes down because the follower count goes up. So, like we were at 23% of Deliverance conversion rate on day 1. And then by, let's say day, 3 to 5, we ranged between like around 16% because we had many more followers, none of them backed, but they all followed. So because we have such a high conversion rate, it's we're clearly delighting a portion of fans that, and by the end of a campaign, like our Deliverance campaign, we had 23% conversion. That ended at 40% conversion. So this one being at 27% already, we could have, in theory, like 50% of these people convert by the end of the campaign.
I can totally see that, especially in your final 48, because if your follower count's still going up, and because then most likely someone follows they haven't backed, right? They are thinking about backing, so that's a pretty hot lead. It's a pretty warm lead that's going to potentially, that will try and nurture either through stretch goals or reveals. I know we got a reveal coming up soon. Those things like that, right? So yeah, they should definitely play into your conversion rate, and I bet you do get like over 50% easy.
Yeah,
Which would be great because then you'll that'll ultimately end up being a really good ending goal. So that'd be really nice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, one other thing that I find really cool, and this is a little bit of a tangent from the topic, but it's relevant to everybody that uses Kickstarter. I believe GameFound has something similar, but Kickstarter released what they call advanced analytics. This is in beta. You're only allowed to look at this while your campaign is live. You can export reports though. So if before the end of my campaign I want all the report, I can download the report and have a physical copy, even though I will lose access to this at the end of my report. So one additional thing, in addition to making my final edits on the page that will be immortalized forever, that it won't be able to change, like, get it on our website at this address or whatever. You want to make sure to download that advanced creator or advanced analytics report of your final report, and it says lots of good stuff. For example, I have 606 backers that have returned from my first campaign that pledged in a prior campaign. I've only run one other campaign, which was the Deliverance campaign. So, and it will tell me which campaign. If I had multiple, it would tell me how many backers from which campaigns backed you. So you'll be able to see, like, Shem Phillips launched a game called Scar Bray the same day that I did. That's like game type number 3 or 4 in a particular series of games, but he's got, a bunch of other games on Kickstarter, and he can see what percentage of people backed from what campaign, like how many back from his Ezra and Nehemiah campaign, how many back from, his Viscounts of the West Kingdom campaign, So I find that to be really, really interesting. So for
That'd
us,
be really interesting. If you, and wonder like how he'd be able to use that to create his audience, like for his. I'm not sure what he's using for his CRM or anything like that, but if he'll be able to tag those people and say, okay, this person, and he may already be doing this, but this person may have 4 tags associated, like divide count, so forth. That way he has, but then from there, he should be able to kind of extrapolate what kind of player that is. Like, okay, this player has done these 4 games. He went from this one to
they
this
might
one, which
really
aren't
like this
necessarily
next one coming.
yeah, like they aren't even the same IP, but they have their worker placement or something like that. So you might be able to well, okay, that's gonna be really good data to use to try and help build your CRM and get an idea of your audience. What is it? Profiles, what they call them, and be able to attach those profiles to the individual player, individual customers.
Yeah. And I think that's something you could also do in a lot of ways with, let's say, like the backer list. So, the backer list for one campaign to the backer list of the next campaign, you can tag those people in your email marketing system.
Yeah.
And, like they bought this one and they bought that one and that kind of thing, which is useful. But what the number one takeaway that I have on this particular thing is the returning backers. I have a 22% return rate. I've only done like one update to my Kickstarter people. That was launch day. And so it is a very fertile ground for me to market. And I should absolutely be sending regular updates to those people. That is a great way that they will receive updates, get noticed, get notified and whatnot. So during the mid-campaign slump, which we're just entering into right now, I should absolutely be doing several things. I need to be sending updates to my Kickstarter backers for the first campaign, letting them know like all the awesome things that are being unlocked in this one, and giving them reasons to take a look at it and actually back it. So I don't want to just send, that you want to send information that people value when they open it. Otherwise, they're not going to open your information, right? And so that's, which we could talk about. It's a whole topic in and of itself. But if I share like, hey, we just unlocked this angel, we also unlocked card dividers for every card type in Deliverance. It's like there's a value there. All you have to do is back the expansion, and you get all these card dividers. You get new angels and other things. That's like a big deal. But if I'm like, hey guys, you love Deliverance and please back this campaign. There's just, it's like, what you can do for me, like, here's what you can do for me. And I like to lead with like, here's what I'm doing for you. Jump in and be a part of it. You should jump in and be a part of it with us. And then it's like, okay, well, there's, going back to that value, like what do I get versus what am I giving? I need to get more in value than I'm giving in value, right? So like, even with something as simple as like an email address, I will not give my email address to you to market to me just on a landing page if I'm not really interested in the content of the landing page. if it's not appealing to me, I'm not. I actually, my email address has value to me. So yeah, if I think that what your product is doing is really cool, definitely going to be a part of that. Like Wise Wizard Games is releasing this trading card game called Draconis 8 that reminds me of like Triple Triad from Final Fantasy 8, and I'm just like all about that. And it's like an entire TCG deck can be purchased in a single booster pack. It's like, dude, 9 cards is a whole TCG like deck. This is really interesting. So I immediately jumped in. Like, yeah, I will follow for that. I'm really curious about that. And we may even be marketing that. I reached out to them. I was like, I love this. So anyway, that's fertile ground. Definitely email marketing. My email list is very fertile ground. We have roughly 8,500 people on our email list, and we had a lot of them back, but there are still a lot that would back, but it's maybe they're not like as hardcore as like we'll say like your inner circle of fans that will back everything you make. They're probably following, they probably marked it on their calendar. They're definitely in, they were all in day one for everything all in, even though they already had a base game. They just love to support you that much. But then there's like the next level of fan that's like, yeah, I love this game, but I have things to do. Like I have 7 kids or whatever. There are a bunch of things to do. And I missed launch day because I just, forgot I wanted to be there, but life got in the way. And then they back you later. They're like, oh yeah, the email will remind them this is a thing and you should do it. And I'm like, yes, I'm definitely doing that. And they jump in. Then there's the next layer of people that are less committed, and the next layer of people that really need to be convinced. Like, I heard about it. I saw it. I've played. I haven't even opened the box yet. It's still in the shrink wrap. That's a group of people. That's a very common, especially for crowdfunding. It's like,
Sure.
how can you back a game and 2 years later or whatever, a year later, have it in the shrink wrap still? Well, I mean, I'm like talking to myself because I've got some games in the shrink wrap that I backed on Kickstarter. And so that's just you've got to be a little bit more convincing, have a little more value in exchange for what they consider, because they've obviously placed less value in your game. If it's in the shrink wrap, they want to play it, they look forward to play it, but maybe it's in a long line of games that they have to paint the other minis first, or maybe it's something they want to play, but it's not super common that their game group likes to learn new games, and so it's a tall order to get their game group to learn a new game, and it's kind of sitting in line for that experience, and it just hasn't made it yet because they haven't been passionate enough to be like, guys, we need to play this one right now. There are other games that they're also clamoring for attention to, and so it's a
Yeah,
matter
that's a
of
challenge,
yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
Especially, I mean, that's probably a whole topic in itself. Like, does delivery time play into it not being played? Does because sometimes we buy games out of FOMO, right? Like we're out there like, oh,
Mhm.
like I've got a few. I'm like, oh, I can't miss out on this. I got to grab it. It finally arrives or whatever, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I guess I'm not as excited as I was when I bought it, kind of
Mhm.
thing. I mean, like I was really
Yep.
hyped up. That's a challenge. That's definitely a publisher's challenge,
Mhm.
and you'll see that that's one of the hardest points of being a publisher is that, like, you get this product, you're asking for the audience to have faith in you, buy this thing, not sight unseen, but
Mhm.
knowing that it doesn't physically exist yet, right? It's still files at this point.
Yep.
And then we're gonna get it finished up to across the finish line and brought to you, and then it will be a fun experience.
Yep.
Well, and I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if, um, from a Kickstarter or publisher standpoint, if there should be some secondary campaign on when the game arrives, like to recreate the hype, to encourage getting it to the table. Like, do you do like I think Andromeda's Edge is just landed, right? And that's you see that everywhere now. Everyone's just posting pictures all over social media and stuff like that, which made me want to get the game. But I wonder if that's something that publishers should do to encourage that gameplay when it finally does arrive, because sometimes it's a year out. Some of these games they run into issues, and now it's 2 years before it lands, and there can be a negative effect. Like when it lands, like, well, I was happy about this 2 years ago, but now I don't want to play it. And there's a game I think I gave away or something like that. I was just out of spite. Like, this took so long and so many social issues with it that it just got that I don't want to have it. I don't want it anymore. And you end up just giving it away. that was definitely a tangent, but I feel like that's something that maybe should be adapted by publishers to encourage gameplay, because at that point, you now have stock in hand. It's in your warehouse, and you can sell more of it. And while it's great that people are sharing photos of them playing and stuff like that, that might not be enough, but if, on its own merit. But if you can encourage that and create a whole new swell of people being excited about it, and for like again, Andromeda's Edge, I don't have it, but I'm seeing everybody, and they're talking about, oh, it's the new Dwellings, it's better than Dwellings, it's got this and that. Well, that gets me excited to purchase it. And what's even better about that is it's not paid marketing; it's community marketing, right? It says free marketing because people are so excited about it. So maybe it does need to have some paid marketing. Maybe the publisher does need to do a post campaign when it arrives, saying, you know, I don't know if it's somebody Guerrilla Tactics or something like that, but something to keep in mind, like when it does land, just to get people hyped up again, because it will result in outer ring sales. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that one of the biggest pushes that I made during the first Kickstarter campaign and right thereafter, during while it was for Deliverance, while that was in process, was to get people to play on Tabletop Simulator. If they had an experience with the game, then I figured that they would be much more likely to actually purchase when the time came, or they would be likely to actually open the box when the time came. Because I was, as somebody who's backed well over 200 Kickstarters at this point, board games in particular, I have many games on my shelf. I've had that experience too, where it's like I'm really excited, but then I read a review that's like, oh, this game wasn't any good, I didn't see anything special about it, and that kind of takes the wind out of my sails, right?
Yeah, it
And
does.
so yeah, I don't know, how do you feel about that? Has that ever happened to you, where you just like were so excited, but then you read somebody that played it first and then it just makes you less excited?
Yeah, yeah. There's a few over here that I have. Yeah, there's a couple there. There's one. I mean, no knock on James. Like I have Tidal Blades, I went all in. I FOMOed hard on that one on Tidal Blades, and uh, it's still in shrink. And that was actually because I'm a very table presence kind of guy. I like my game. I just felt a little disoriented on the table. So once I saw it in real life, that's where I hadn't even opened it. I had my copy in the house. I just happened to be at a convention, and it was on the table, and it was enough for me not to open it, which is the weirdest thing. And that's, again, no knock on James, the designers, or anything, because it's a gorgeous game. It is gorgeous, but we carry those little things with us, those little nuggets, and they affect how we're going to approach a game. So very much like you having someone said, "Oh, it was all right." Well, then it's like, well, I don't know, is it all right, or do I spend time learning it and see if it's actually all right? And if it turns out it's true that it's just all right, is this lost time, or do I trust that one person? It's weird how much faith or trust we put into some rando online going, it was
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, well, there you go. I don't need to play it anymore. That's so stupid. You
Yeah,
need to go
it's
play that game, Andrew. Change your mind. Pull it out
seriously.
of the string wrap and play it. Come up with your own decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly, I feel in some cases, like for example, Lord of the Rings, the card game, when Marvel Champions came out, I had Lord of the Rings, the card game, and I bought Marvel Champions because I heard it was a better version of Lord of the Rings. Stopped playing the Lord of the Rings card game, played Marvel Champions, was like, had a lot of fun and everything. Started buying Marvel Champion stuff because I'm like, well, this game is superior, mechanically. It's just more modern and whatnot. It's like, but I really like Lord of the Rings though. I just really like it. And yeah, the mechanics aren't as like solid and modern, and I feel like the games can drag on a little bit, but I just really like that game. I think I like it more than Marvel Champions anyway, and
Yeah.
it's something that I've kind of come, as I think gamers mature in their game collection and what they really like. They see games that, like for example, I would have backed Gloomhaven immediately if it was a little earlier in my game career, but I'm like, this is the type of game that takes 30 minutes or more to set up, that you need to keep set up in between sessions if you really want to get the most out of it. That is not the type of game that can hit the table at my house very often. I
Oh
like
yeah.
the really thinky, crunchy games. Like I would love to play Gloomhaven, but I just know it wouldn't hit the table very much just because of the length of time that it requires to set up. And it's also competing with other things. So like one of the things I did with Deliverance is I made it so that you could set the game up in 10 minutes or less, put it away in 10 minutes or less, and it would be and everything goes in its organized spot in the box so that you know how to bust it out the next time. And campaign missions take an hour or less, and that kind of thing. And then the game night skirmish mode is like 1 to 2 hours, because you have more time at that, with that. And so people that have families like me can actually bust it out, right? And but it's just, now I know a little bit more of what to look for and that kind of thing. But I think that the kind of what we're both talking about is you want to get people excited, and there are a whole bunch of facets to that. One of them is find reviewers that love your product. Make sure you share those reviews. It's not just for reviewers to show with their audience. It's for you to use that as social proof to that one person that's on the fence that receives your game or is about to, that am I hyped about this? Because they are going to find that naysayer that's just like, this game was okay. I didn't see anything special, and they played like 15 minutes of it and died or whatever. It's like, well,
I got the
obviously
rules wrong, and they're like, I don't get it.
yeah. It's like they didn't even use the darkness cards or whatever, and they're like, I don't understand what this
No
game
wonder
is.
you didn't like it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, right? But then you get one counter, you're offering counter evidence, you're again building value in
Yeah.
your product from that one reviewer that really loved the game, or here's some gameplay, get hyped, you're about to receive this, or here's how to play, or play on Tabletop Simulator, refresh yourself on the rules, or
I like
whatever,
that
right?
idea right there. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're arriving soon. Go to
Yep.
TTS, give it a shot, get ready to go. That way, um, uh, when it arrives, you can just break it out and start going. Right? It's just going to be
Yep.
on the table that much quicker. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, or even like an official how to play rules video, bringing one company in and being like, hey, this is the official how to play video. And then you can put a QR code and let everybody know, like, QR code in your rulebook, that like hate reading rules. It's one thing I pulled from Exploding Kittens, the Exploding Kittens company. They did like poetry for Neanderthals, and it was like, do you hate reading rules? Here's a QR code. It's like, I love that. Definitely going to use that. So you can do a dynamic QR code. Every company that does QR codes is basically owned by Intuit or MailChimp now. So no matter, there are like 8 websites that sell QR codes that are all owned by the same company. And so you can pay, will cost you a little bit per month. I want to say you can get like 2 of these without ongoing costs. But so one of them for your rule book, and you can later attach that QR code to a particular website address, which is just a YouTube video link. So you can bring them to YouTube, they scan the QR code, and 6 months after you actually printed that QR code, you're going to be able to still change it, which is really important. So the QR code, we had one how to play video that was good, but then another one came out later that was a little better. So we changed it to that one. You can also use QR codes on your materials for a convention that you can change dynamically on the fly if you need to. Or, maybe if something comes up later, you can change it. So, but yeah, so that's pretty solid. So, like, what, you have any final thoughts in regard to expansion, like running an expansion campaign versus like a standalone product
Well,
campaign?
having just gone through it, because my second game was an expansion within the IP. It
Mm,
was completely different mechanics. Like we had ended up licensing our first game from Devon, and so and it was different. I mean, it was definitely a different challenge because the game, while it was in the same universe as Cryptic Cafe, being all different mechanics, it was a tile-based game versus an order fulfillment game. And I was hoping that the IP would carry that one a little bit more. Granted, in the second game, we focused a little more on food, so I think that's where our challenge was. That our
mhm.
initial audience was very cryptid fans, and we still have cryptids in the second game, but it's definitely more geared towards the food. And I think that kind of hurt us a little bit. But to go to your question, um, I think you'll find more success with an expansion that is part of that DNA we were talking about, like, or all the core set's still there, and you're just kind of tagging onto that. And I'm actually exploring doing an expansion to the original Cryptic Cafe that uses, again, the whole order fulfillment. We were thinking about introducing all new
Mhm.
cryptids and then adding a little more. Right, you just add a little bit more to the gameplay. I think one of the ideas is that we were going to give some of the customers you serve special bonuses. Like if you serve them at this level, you're going to get an extra tip or something. So we were going to develop, expand the game, make it a little more
Mhm.
so that you'd want to end up purchasing that. So you have the DNA, right, expansion, which makes sense. I can see even the DNA standalone, which would be like the Chronicles of Time, right, or Chronicles of Crime, where they're using the same thing, but they're not direct expansions to the game.
Mhm.
Like you don't have to have the base game, but it is using the same DNA. It's just exploring that universe a little longer. So then you get that, and then you had, in my case, where we did basically a sequel within the IP, which was an entirely different game, but the expansion part of it is only in the IP. They all offer different challenges for sure, and I think you just have to recognize the audience that goes with it. So my final thoughts being, um, I think easier would be DNA expansions that are not standalones. I think that, like what you've done here with Deliverance, is, I believe, an easier transition for a player because they already know how the game's going to play. They only have to learn a little bit more about, okay, we got some new talents, so we got some new keywords and things like that. So it's easier to digest. You're coming in with a built-in audience because on that level, they already have an understanding they did. They don't have to relearn the game. Whereas in my version, it's I've got to learn a whole new game. Yeah, it's within the same IP, but now I've got to learn this all new. It's like buying a brand new game and having to relearn it all. So we're creating a new audience. So you're already going to have fans of the gameplay, which is awesome. We're extending that gameplay. Great. It's within my IP that I love, Angels and all that stuff. Awesome. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess I can't remember where I was going with final thought, but I believe that the
DNA
DNA
over.
expansion is
Yeah.
probably the easiest one to not manipulate, but easiest one to implement, right? And I think you will most likely see the more success on the DNA expansion, versus just theme alone, like what I was
Yep.
trying to do.
That's an
Um,
excellent thought. I'll
yeah.
say, for my kind of final thought, there was a talk that I was a part of back in 2020. Justin Gary, who designed Ascension, and they've had 23 expansions or more at this point
Mhm.
for Ascension. He said that something that kind of stuck with me was the very first expansion that you do for your game. People are just going to want more of the game. And I actually polled my audience and asked them, polled my fans long ago and said, if we do an expansion for Deliverance, what would you guys like more of? And, I gave them lots of choices and they could add their own. It was like more angels, more bosses, more campaign missions, more whatever, right? And the playable characters were dominantly the number one. New talents for the base game, angels were, it was okay. But new campaign missions were way high too. I was like, okay, they really
Yeah.
want new characters and a new campaign. And they don't need everything to be different. They just what they've purchased and played, they've grown to love, and they just want more of that. So you don't need to make this dramatic change to your product in order to get more sales and whatnot. I will
Is there
say
any
that
negative feedback to that? Like where people like, you don't need an expansion, or why are you even thinking
um
about doing this?
no, actually, people were generally very happy about that, and I think that's important to listen to. Important to listen to your community, where they were, they would say, "I don't think this needs an expansion." I do think that you should kind of think through what would we expand if we did, even before you release the first game. If you release it like Stonemeyer Games does this thing where, like Scythe, they released 3 expansions. They were like, when this third expansion is done, it's the universe is wrapped up. Chip Theory
Yeah.
Games is doing the same thing with Cloudspire. When Cloudspire's third expansion is done, it's wrapped up. But then, of course, Stonemeyer Games released Expeditions, which is like Scythe 2.0. And they're like, this is a new game that uses DNA from Scythe that has expansions coming, right? So it's a
Right.
standalone game in the Scythe universe that is like the sequel to Scythe, And so there are a lot of ways to kind of get around that. So, well, I think that is a lot. I'll give you one plug. You did our Kickstarter page, and
Yeah.
it is amazing. If
It is
anybody wants
pretty.
to hire you for, it was a lot of
Yeah.
work, but you really, it was just incredible. So if anybody wants to hire you for work, I know you do take work. You're a busy guy, but you always leave yourself open to like one project, 2 projects, and it's always feast or famine as a graphic designer. So how can people get in
Yeah.
contact with you if they want an incredible graphic artist for their project?
No, they should reach out to someone else. I'm just kidding. No, Chip at chipthedesigner.com is an easy way to go. That's my email address. And then if they want to see some sampling of stuff, oddly enough, my website's a different name. It's chipcolecreative.com. And you'll see samples of Kickstarter pages I've done for you, Brotherwise, and a variety of other people. And then some design work for actual games. And I think for some reason I get a lot of Kickstarter pages. That seems to be the majority of my work, but I do handle everything.
You're even an illustrator
well.
as well, and that
I
has
am.
helped so much.
Yeah.
You're not just a graphic artist, but you can take what I have and then fill in the gaps to make it awesome, which has been extremely, extremely helpful, I'll say.
Yeah.
It's a very, very valuable complementary skill set. So,
Well, I appreciate the
well,
plug. Oh, please.
yeah. I mean, hopefully you get some great work. Thank you guys for listening. I know it's been an hour and 20 minutes, but
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't think we were going to go this long. I was like, I don't know if people want to hear me, but this has been awesome.
We'll see. Robot Richard, send us out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.